How did you become interested in this field?
By an order. By an order. I came back to Israel 30 years ago and took over a child and adolescent psychiatry unit, and just a regular child psychiatry unit in a general hospital pediatric department, which was based in the outpatients care basically, and attached to it was a day center for autistic children. And I had no particular inclination to be involved. In fact, I requested my boss to remove it from my area of responsibility, and he said no. Fortunately. I'm going to talk about autism today from the perspective of the name itself. It's What's in a Name is the title of the talk, and that's taken from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Well, the original misconception comes from the name itself, and that's the point. Because originally it was given to one of the symptoms of schizophrenia. And then Leo Kanner in the 1940s took the name on in describing 11 kids that he wrote about at 20, 30 years. And, well, that's another word which can create a lot of misunderstanding, because there's a difference between spectrum and continuum. And very much those two words are interchanged. Spectrum is actually a word which comes from physics, and we have the light spectrum, which are actually discrete dimensions of light. And in actual sense, when we talk about autistic spectrum disorder, we are actually referring to discrete developmental dimensions, and put together gives us a sort of a profile of the individual child based on certain fundamental problems that the child has, and that goes back to the idea of the triad, where there are problems in relationship, there are problems in communication, and there's problems in interests. Those three elements have to be in the diagnosis of autism, but they don't describe sufficiently the tremendous amount of individual differences, and that's where spectrum comes in. That's definitely correct, as long as it's a variety and not a continuum. And it is a variety, but it's certainly to do with brain development. Everything about children is daunting for parents. I think that's a given. Fortunately, nature has made us that way. And when children are not developing in the expected way, that makes the daunting so much more. One of the developments, I suppose, in the last 10 years has been that more and more children are suspected of being autistic or have the autistic spectrum, who indeed do not, because every kind of socially unacceptable behavior of children, depending on age, of course, suddenly, somebody will say, well, maybe he's in the spectrum. I see a lot of children who are sent to me who are suspected of being in the spectrum but are not. Their problems in social relatedness comes from other issues, usually, of course, emotional. And that's why people who diagnose autism must have skills also in understanding children's emotional development at different phases, their psychological development and what affects that, because that also affects children's social relatedness without it having necessarily. Because, you see, the definition, the working definition of autism has in it the words qualitative abnormalities. If one, again, words have mean a lot because they create how we think. They reflect and they also create how we think. Qualitative abnormalities is a very difficult concept to translate into clinical practice. What is qualitative abnormal depends very much on the age, level of development, other issues that a child is having, and the clinician's skill to be able to say, well, this is qualitative abnormality. It's not quantitative abnormality. It's something in the essence of the relationship, in the essence of the communication that is not normal. So that's difficult.